Welcome back to the MindFit Movement Podcast. Today I have Mr. Mark Groves on the podcast. Mark is a human connection specialist, emotional translator, writer, speaker, and a coach. Welcome to the potty, brother.
Thank you for having me. Bringing Canada, merging Canada and Australia.
That's it, mate. That's
like this.
Canada-Australian or something like that.
Austra-Canada. No, that doesn't sound, that sounds like we're going to get ostracized. That might happen. Who knows? We're too nice, so we'll get kicked out of the world.
Very, very nice. So, Mr. Groves, tell me a little bit about yourself and what realm you live in, what realm you work in. And yeah, give the listeners a bit of an introduction to yourself.
Well, first, thanks for having me, my friend. I'm happy we get to connect again and have it recorded. That's that's different, but I love it. We always have such great conversations. So I'm excited to see what unfolds. My work is in the area of understanding and teaching what is it that makes for great connection, and often we think about that in the context of romantic relationships, because that's, where we sort of derive most of our pain and most of our pleasure. And it's a magnifying glass to the things we're really not great at. That's why I'm intrigued by how people show up in them. And it always finds really, in essence, the gems of what we need to work on. But I, can literally look at any area of someone's life and how they relate to money, to food, to people, to work. They all have similar patterns. That saying that I think is quite overused now, but it's a great saying. How we do one thing is how we do everything.
Yes.
And
yes,
that's certainly true. We will often pick an area of our life where we thrive, and we'll use that as an area of avoidance of where we don't thrive, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because, you could be really good at something you do for work. But if you use that as a way of escape from your true inability to show up in relationship, then it's not so good anymore. It's like any addiction, a glass of scotch is great to unplug, but if you're using it to be unplugged, then it's not good.
Fully. So do you think that the way that we show up in romantic relationships is kind of the way we show up in a relationship with our friends and with our family?
Yeah, like if we have bad boundaries in romantic relationships, we'll have learned them usually from our family. And it will echo in every area of our life. If we were, as a kid, someone who always wanted to please or something like that, will often be the same thing as an adult. So, what we learned in terms of relationship and family dynamics and who we needed to be in order to fit in and be safe. I mean, everything we do that gets in the way of love is really trying to get in the way of hurt. It's just that we don't know the difference. We don't know that you can learn a skill set that allows you to still show up to love and minimize or mitigate the hurt that you experience, because we're all going to experience hurt. You can't love someone and not at the same time experience what it might be like to lose them. Those are two lines that you sign when you enter a relationship. I accept the depth of connection that might occur here, which means I accept the depth of pain that might occur. Those always operate in equal. You don't go deeper emotionally without going deeper with a risk.
Yeah. Wow. Because, I want emotional depth and intimacy. But what I've found in the past is that I can shy away from having the tough conversations. And, it's because it's fucking terrifying. You know what I mean?
It really is.
Yeah. And I'm a bit of a nice guy. So, well, that's the nice guy kind of template. So I try and people please, and, I don't want to hurt people's feelings by bringing certain subjects up and stuff like that. So it's a big thing for me that I've got to work through. And do you have any sort of pointers of like how people can instigate those conversations without feeling like they're going to hurt somebody's feelings?
Well, the moment that you take responsibility for someone else's feelings, then you put them ahead of your own, and it's, as an adult, we're not responsible for someone else's feelings. I'm not responsible for the truth hurting your feelings. I'm responsible for how I deliver it. That's true, right? Like if I deliver it in high volume and with aggression, you're not going to hear me, first off. And second, I'm not delivering it in an emotionally safe way. So clearly I've probably learned somewhere that if I'm a bulldozer and I'm loud, people listen. So I'm still, still opportunity for healing in that perspective for me if I showed up that way. But, the classic nice guy, which, hey, quote unquote, I would consider myself a recovering nice guy, and still see areas of my life sometimes where I don't speak my full truth. Or, the fact that you're doing this podcast is probably incredibly healing for that. Is you're putting yourself out there to the world at the price of how it might make people feel.
Yeah, totally.
Like you can't be in your own voice and in your own truth, and at the same time filter it. Right? Like if we don't want to tell the truth because I'm afraid the truth will hurt you, then I now have rejected myself first. So if I'm like afraid to tell you what I think because I'm afraid you'll reject me or be hurt, I have in that moment rejected myself. So the irony is we then get mad at the other person, but the truth is they're just a mirror. Their rejection is just a mirror of our own internal rejection. But if I make me telling the truth the most important thing, and it determines my own self-worth, then it doesn't matter what happens outside of me. It might still hurt, but it just doesn't matter anymore how you respond. How you respond is on you.
That's true. That's true. So a human connection specialist, can you tell me a little bit about what that actually, like the definition of a human connection specialist and an emotional translator?
Well, I found that often the idea or the work that I was doing was taking these feelings that people had, or they weren't even sure they had, getting them back in their bodies, getting them back to pointing out and actually naming a feeling. Most people have experiences in their bodies, but they don't put names to the experiences. They often try to escape the experience, or they feel so flooded, that overwhelm, the frog in your throat when you want to share something. All of these are emotions. And, you could think that the moment you start to put a label to one, like, oh, my stomach is upset, I feel anxious, or I have a frog in my throat, I'm angry, or I'm sad, or I have grief that I'm holding back. Human connection is really about how do I maintain and curate a space between you and I? It doesn't matter whether you move from friendship to romantic relationship, the skills that are required to communicate how you feel are the exact same. It's just that when we're in relationship with someone who might reject us or abandon us, well, now we level up our game of defenses. So it might be easier to have a hard conversation at work because we know that if we don't do it well, we might lose our job, right? So we have more emotional resilience usually at work, but that's not always true. I've certainly worked with people where I've seen them lose their minds because they just haven't developed the skill set. That's why triggers are triggers. You can feel rejected because you didn't get a promotion over someone else, and that can feel the same way you felt when your little brother or sister or your big brother or sister got something and you didn't. Right. And so, triggers are always invitations to healing.
That's so true. So is that sort of where your work is based around, of people's triggers and how they can deal with those better?
Yeah. In essence, like in that space between you and I, we can feel if there's something in the way. You and I can feel if there's a conversation we haven't had or something. Even, like my brother and I have a brother and a sister. They're both older than me. I had probably like 2 or 3 significant life moments that got in the way of him and I truly connecting authentically. I still resented him about things that happened when I was like 8, and another one that happened when I was like 16, and another one when I was 13, actually, now that I'm saying that. And I cleared all of those moments with him. And I remember when I did it about 4 years ago. And I replayed the experience of it for me. One way to minimize the trigger in someone else is to start your conversations with, in my experience. Because when I say in my experience, then now you have the room to have your own experience.
Okay.
And so it's saying, from my lens, this happened. And so I shared that with him, those moments. And he was like, I did that? Oh my God, I can't believe I did those things. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, what an asshole. Like, I didn't. So it's funny because, I find that it's not funny, but the moments that we hold on to that really hurt us, the other person doesn't even know.
Mm.
They have no clue. They have no clue that like this moment in the past has like crippled us. And to them, they're like, just going on about their day.
Yeah, 100%. And I always wonder what have I done to somebody that's really hurt them that I have no idea about.
I've thought about that too. I remember listening to a line from, I think it was Carolyn Mace's book, her Audible book. I forget which one, but she said that for every person you're taking a personal growth course to heal and get over, someone's taking one to get over you. And I thought it's funny when we think about that, because we don't think about the hearts we break. We think about our own hearts.
Yeah, fully. Interesting. All right, so I wanted to get into something that kind of gets flown around the internet as a bit of a joke, because I think it happens all the fucking time, and I don't know why it's so funny, but we seem to joke a lot about red flags, right?
Oh yeah, we do. Memes. That's true.
There's those memes, like there's two people facing each other. One person has a bunch of roses and the other one has a bunch of red flags, like in the form of roses, and they're like on their back kind of thing. And then there's also, like funny memes, like I shared one the other day. It was, I have a 3 red flag rule. If I spot 3 or more red flags by the 3rd date, I then go colorblind for the rest of our toxic relationship.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. That's really good.
So like, it's a big thing. Red flags are a big thing. And I want to know, like, what's the definition of a red flag?
Well, I think a red flag could be, one, behaviors that identify that this person is potentially toxic, has not done any healing work, is reactive, is dominating, is controlling, is a victim, is, the full spectrum of, I would say, living in their pain, living in their pain and living from their pain. So, and that it is spreading, that saying that hurt people hurt people. I think that's a good, people with red flags. It's that if you and I meet someone who has, we're all going to have behaviors and areas we need to work on, behaviors that we need to heal, and for me, when I first started really looking at the way I show up in romantic relationship, I would say that I could get quite defensive sometimes when I was given feedback. I would say I definitely got defensive when I was given feedback. And when you sign up for a romantic relationship, I mean, ultimately, you're also, I think in the modern definition of partnership, this was not true historically, but people still live from the historical definition. Historically, you got married because that's just what you did. And you had kids and you married someone from a family that made sense, or whatever it is. I mean, ultimately, the history of relationship and marriage was to get in-laws, to be safer, to have more land, to marry rich people marry rich people, and poor marry poor. Like, it was a way to maintain social constructs. And now when, for some people, I'd say the people listening to this, the real desire when you enter a relationship is to grow, and to grow with this person and to learn with them. And you can't sign up for that without humility. You have to be willing to be wrong. And red flags, one of them is that I'm not willing to be wrong, that I am not willing to learn from you, that I'm not willing to own my shit. And gosh, you'll find people who are, that joke, that, red flags, they're my favorite. I remember seeing a meme with a guy with a bouquet of red flags, and it said that, red, this is my favorite. But it's a joke, but it's funny to all of us, because I think for a lot of us, we identify with that we missed the red flag. We missed it. It was so glaringly obvious. And instead of learning from it, we repeat it. When someone says to me, like, all I attract is assholes, or all I attract is controlling people, or all I attract is narcissists, I'm like, yeah, because you haven't changed your choice. Like, there's something in the pattern that you haven't changed. They're like, no, this is just what I have. This is just, it's called a pattern of behavior. You miss red flags, probably because your parents had red flags and you had to learn to make red flags normal to exist in your home. You know, and when we can start to tell the story about where it came from, then all of a sudden we have compassion to where it came from. And then we might look at, hey, this isn't actually something wrong with me. This was actually something I had to do to survive. Well, now I can have compassion for the part of me that ignores red flags and learn to not do that. Because red flags are pretty fucking obvious. Let's be honest. You know, your friend tells you like, da da da, you know, and then like if someone's rude to a waiter, you know, that's a pretty good red flag.
Right.
That's a pretty obvious one. And then 6 months later, they're rude to you all the time. I mean, it's real. Where did it first start? I don't know. It just came out of nowhere. That's what we love to do, because then we're not responsible for it. But it never came out of nowhere. I mean, very seldom. I have compassion for people who were totally hoodwinked. But even the people, I don't know if that's a saying in Australia, but totally tricked. And yeah, like where they were totally tricked by someone who was just like the greatest liar in the world. That's super rare. I mean, that is rare. I'm not saying that if it happened to you and you identify that way and you're listening to this, I'm not invalidating your experience. And if you were being honest with yourself, like truly honest, and you went to a friend who tells you the truth, you probably got rid of those though for a little while. If you go to a friend who tells you the truth, ask them if the red flags were there earlier. I'm going to just bet they were probably there.
Yeah, totally. So if we see red flags, why do we choose to not, what's the word? I guess to not validate them, or we go, oh, that was a bit strange, but then we push that aside, and then we just look at the positive stuff in them, and we continue on with the dating or the relationship with them.
Well, I think there's a number of confounding factors. I mean, one is that we're probably an optimist, and that's a good thing. But optimism in the face of naivety is actually not good. You know, it's great to be an optimist, but it's not great to be an ignorant optimist. And I think in that sense, you know, we have also, like I mentioned before, you could have grown up in a home with parents who were like destructive, fanatic, narcissistic, cheaters, liars. Well, to grow up in your home, you had to learn to ignore the glaring obvious just for survival, that it was obvious that these were not good humans, or there was not a good human. So then when you actually unconsciously define that as love, that chaos is love, that uncertainty is love. But love really goes against the whole narrative of what we're taught, which is like butterflies and all those things. But butterflies is actually anxiety and a nervous system response to uncertainty, you know? So I don't mean that you can't have a real excitement about someone, but I just would be careful using the term butterflies, because butterflies is literally like an uncertain, anxious feeling.
Yeah.
And that's not always good, because that often comes with risk and pain and, yeah, I mean, especially with risk. Now, why would we glare over them? I think the other one is that we often date from a space of scarcity. Like we date from a space of, you know, I worked with this one woman, she called it that she had last man on earth syndrome. That every time she dated someone and she had a connection with, she assumed they were just the last man on earth. I thought that was funny because it's true. That's what we do. We experience connection and then we forget. We're so desperate for it to be the one or the person that we don't act on information. Instead, we're like, I like this concept that we should be looking for green flags. You know, like we're looking for red flags, of course, but you know, when that green flags actually make someone sexy, you know, good communication, not a flake, you know, treats everybody with respect. But we're often not sexually attracted to those people because, you know, inherently we're being invited through what we're attracted to heal what we're hurting from. So that's kind of fucked up, you know, because then we think like, I think of it like we eroticize our pain. We like make sexy the thing that actually hurts us. And that's tough, because then if I tell someone like, you need to stop dating the people you have chemistry with because you need to relearn what chemistry is.
Right.
And calm probably bores you because you grew up with chaos. I say, well, I'm just supposed to date people who are boring then? I'm like, maybe you should redefine as boring as safe and certain. because dependability is actually incredibly fucking sexy. Incredibly sexy. But it's funny that we don't want to fuck dependability.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Crazy. So I'll share a little story from me. It's probably going to be a little bit vulnerable, but
Good. I love vulnerability.
but whatever. So, and this has got to do with, now that I look back on it, I know it was a massive red flag. So I met this chick, and it was in Bali.
Mm-hmm.
And
a
we
place
were hanging
where
out.
Lovers meet.
That's where
that's
lovers
where
meet.
That's where Eat, Pray, Love was filmed. I get it.
Yeah. And well, I mean, a couple of friends of mine just got married, and they met in Bali after a Tinder date. So,
right on. You never know.
There's success in Bali. But anyway, so I met this chick, and then she was sort of like ex-friends with one of my friends there. And for some reason, she had the opinion that we had been together before, my friend and I. And I told her, no, it's like, we're just friends. But she kept bringing it up, like over the couple of days we were hanging out, she kept bringing it up, like, basically we caught up for a drink that night. And then she's like, the first thing she said was like, hey, you need to promise me that you haven't been with, I'm going to use the name Stephanie, right?
Sure.
You need to promise me that you haven't been with Stephanie. And I'm like, I've already told you that there's nothing going on there. We're just friends. And she's like, are you sure? And I was like, yes, I'm telling you right now, there's nothing going on. She's like, well, Stephanie's, really liked by a lot of guys, and she's been with a lot of people. So I thought that you would have been with her too. I'm like, no, like, this is the last time I'm going to tell you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the next morning we were riding to the gym, and she was on the back of my motorbike, and we're pulling up to the gym, and she's like, oh, I wonder if Stephanie's going to see me on the back of your motorbike. And I was kind of like, why? Like, I was like, why? She's like, oh, just wondering what she'll think. And I was like, who gives a fuck what Stephanie thinks? Right. Yeah. Anyway, that happened. And then there was a few other times that kind of happened. And then we're sitting in the gym, and she brought her up again. And I said, listen, I do not play fucking games, and I don't like it when women play games either. So please stop playing games. She's like, I don't like games either, and I don't play games. But it's funny to watch you. But it's funny to watch you squint or squirm every time I bring up Stephanie's name.
You're like, yeah, it's called being annoyed.
Right. And I kind of like, I walked away from that situation, and I was like, you know what? That kind of didn't feel right. But then I let it go. And then I kind of felt like I had to prove something to her. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I felt like I had to ignore that red flag to prove to her that I was a good guy, and that I wasn't like the rest of the assholes out there. So, and something that I learned from that was, I shouldn't fucking do that. Right. Because the right person will believe you, when you say that you haven't been with Stephanie, and like you for who you are, and doesn't need to play games. So, yeah.
Well, and it was totally like her old shit of jealousy and uncertainty. I'm guessing that she had an ex-boyfriend cheat on her with a friend or something like that, or lie about something significant.
How did you know that? Because that's what happened.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it, is she's projecting her unhealed hurt onto the new person, which will push them away, of course, because you're like, this is so unattractive. And here you have a good man trying to tell you the truth, but she doesn't believe it because she's been duped before.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was pushing me away, but then I was also fighting for her attention back, because, like you said before, it was kind of a bit naive. So I split up with my fiance 6 years ago. and I've been single ever since.
Yeah.
And I've never been a guy to date. Like I don't know. I just never been on dates. And well, I've been on a couple of dates here and there, but I've never like consistently caught up with a woman. So I was kind of like naive to the fact, like, is this what women are like? Is this how it is, kind of thing, right? So I kept pushing that flag aside. So it's really crazy. And things continued on, more red flags, like probably one a day, right? But
you're starting to collect them.
Yeah. Like we're talking about like a bouquet of roses that looks like red flags. She had a whole fucking florist, like.
Well, that's a lot of unhealed shit. I mean, just alone. So you think about it. Do you mind if I ask you questions about it?
Absolutely.
So if you think about it, you're in that moment in the gym. She's brings up Stephanie again, right? And at that point, because you said before that you wanted her to think that you're not like other guys, right? So at that point, are you thinking, she keeps asking me this because she thinks I'm like other guys? Like she thinks I might lack the integrity.
Yes.
That we're okay.
Yeah.
So then when she says, I don't play fucking games, but now there's a chance for you to prove that you're a good dude.
Yeah.
Right. So in that exchange is what she thinks about me matters more than what I think about me. And as soon as you make that exchange, you lose yourself. As soon as you make their opinion of you matter more than your opinion of you. Because if we're just being truthful and straightforward, are you a good man?
I'm a good man.
Right. So then it shouldn't matter what she says. But that's the child. The child is like, I'm not sure that we are. Like we have to prove who we are. We're not enough. I'm not enough as I am. So I have to prove that I'm enough. I have to get your validation, which usually comes from being a kid. And the adult in us has to stand firm in that space of like, I like to give the analogy that within us is two parts. One is a child, and the child will love everything, anything. People can treat kids poorly and kids will still believe in the best in them. They'll still love them. Kids will get candy from a van that they don't know. Like that's how naive and openly loving a child can be, and comes into this world just open-eyed, and open-hearted, and just trusts that the caregivers they are born to will care for them. That's often not the truth, right? So, but also within us lives a warrior, someone who, modern psychology, you might call it like the adult. This is adulting, right? Is like a part of us who curates what the little child in us loves, curates what has access to the child. But if we never had good adults around us who protected us, or we had, we can go so far to the other end, right? Like look at how people love. We either run towards love and we chase it even when it's not safe. That's the overtly expressed child. Or we protect ourselves from love and wall off, and we're often avoidant, we're assholes, we're guarded, we're walled up. Those are the two extremes of the expression.
Yeah.
But you will never feel safe in either extreme. One, as the child, you're connected to other people, but you don't feel safe. And the other one is you're protected from other people, but you don't feel connected. So you trade one for the other in the extremes. So of course, being an adult who loves from a healthy space is about being both. It's about having that conversation with her that you're interested in her and you're really enjoying getting to know her. And then she asks about Stephanie and you tell her because she's allowed to ask about things that make her insecure. But there's a point where the adult steps in, or the warrior, which is really all nice guys and nice people, whoever identifies as a nice person or a doormat or an empath, all need to develop the warrior in them, the adult.
That's me, for sure.
Right. So it's when you get to that moment where you already know where the moment of self-abandonment was. It was probably a couple motorbike rides before that, but this was a real moment of self-abandonment where she said, you actually stood in your power and said, I don't play fucking games. And she said, I don't either, but that's the line. Where it goes, I will no longer discuss Stephanie. Your insecurities are not mine. I can give you security by telling you the truth. If you don't believe the truth, it's no longer my problem.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where you have them choose. It's interesting though, because people who have been deeply hurt, who operate from the space she's operating from, will test. And that test comes from the desire for, let's just speak in this situation, this heteronormative situation, the desire for the man to finally say that's enough. Because likely no one's ever said that, where they cared enough for them to like stand up for them, because it sounds really weird, but like, and it's from a great book. There's this line where it says, if you don't stand up to her, she'll never believe you'll stand up for her.
Oh yeah.
It's from No More Mr. Nice Guy. Which is a great book. Yeah,
completely. Which is an interesting thing because, like my dad always says, don't get sucked into women's bullshit. Because a lot of the time they're trying to test you. They're trying to test to see if you're a man, if you will stand up for yourself, which in turn is basically, are you going to stand up for them to protect them when they need it? But like, how often is that meant to happen? Or how often should a woman be testing a man?
Well, I mean, if someone, because it doesn't have to be a woman, but if someone has been really hurt and really didn't know where they fit in their parents' life, and et cetera, they will test a lot because they don't trust. They don't trust themselves, really. That's the end of the day. It's a lack of self-trust. Okay. But it gets projected onto the other person. So when you can create a really safe space for them that doesn't tolerate the erratic behavior, then they start to feel more safe because there's a container of trust built around them for them, which is different than control or manipulation or any of that. I would never recommend that. But I'm saying, like, being able to say, these behaviors are not okay with me. I will communicate with you when you are A, B, C, and I will provide the same level of communication. Because if we get erratically reactive to someone like that, we can be firm. But if we get erratically reactive, we're meeting them in their pain too. They're starting chaos, and chaos is probably the pattern of connection they like. Why are you not fighting? Why are you not yelling? Why? I remember at a woman I dated who said to me, we never really fight. And I was like, well, we have disagreements. And she's like, yeah, but I've never had to throw my shoe at you or something like that. And I'm like, why would you throw your shoe at somebody? I just don't understand that. Can't we just have a conversation? But it's interesting because she said, well, when you have those big fights, then you can have post-fight sex. And I was well, can't you just have amazing sex without fighting? But that's how some people are coded from their experience. So again, that's why calm seems foreign. And so when you have that, how often will they test? Well, only as much as you allow the test.
Right.
At some point they start to learn trust, but it's not our job to heal somebody like that. It's just our job to stand in our truth, that calm, present truth that's assertive, that is both warrior and child. I'll open my heart to you if, which isn't conditional love. It's standards. It's saying, I will love you unconditionally. And I will love you if you meet these levels, these standards, which I hold myself. Because it's one thing to say to someone like, I'm a great communicator, I really want to communicate, and then hold back truth from them, then we're lying. It's like, I want a really honest, open, and vulnerable relationship. Or am I honest, open, and vulnerable? If I'm not, then what I desire will never come to me because I'm not it. Yeah. We'll get other people who hold their truths back.
So interesting. Why is this shit not taught in schools, man?
Fuck, man. I know. I had to learn as an adult. I'm always learning. But I had to learn because I saw my own relational dysfunction. And I'm like, why am I so good at talking about everything but my feelings? That just doesn't make any sense. Because it's not a skill set issue then, right? It becomes so much more than that. Yeah. And as soon as I started learning about all this, I'm like, people are just unconsciously living their lives thinking their relationships don't work out. But they don't work out because we're part of them. We're the common denominator in everything in our lives. Why don't we actually start to pay attention to that? you know?
Yeah, fully. So is that what led you to your work was, your own pain and healing?
Yeah, man, same as you. I had an engagement that ended. And then from there, it was like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Why do I not know how to love well? Why did I think I did? Like that. How do you get to a place in your life where you're so disconnected from who you are? I mean, that's a really good question, because so many of us live our whole lives that way. And, I think it's a number of different things. But when we look at our lives, you realize that they're just a blink of an eye. When you look at, I'm 41 now. Shit, I feel like I was 21 not that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, completely, mate. Alrighty. So I want to talk about something else, which is also another thing that's getting sort of flown around the self-development, love and relationship realm, on Instagram and, on the intranets and everything like that. And it's about boundaries, like there's a lot of things, about setting your boundary and, putting a boundary in place with this person. And, like if you want to love yourself better, then you need to, or not just love yourself better, but like teach other people how to love you better, set a boundary. What the fuck's a boundary? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It sounds like, well, coming from the country, it's like you set a boundary around your farm. You know what I mean? Like, how does
that's exactly it. It's like a fence, a border. It's a line that delineates who I am and who you are.
Right.
And that doesn't have to be just literal, because literally it's my skin. But then we can think from a conceptual context. Let's think of like, I have a friend, a lover, a boss, a stranger, and someone who I feel is threatening, all stand around me. Well, each one is going to be allowed to be a little different of a distance from me. So my boundaries also are outside of my body, and they might go quite far out. Like you might be walking down the street, feel threatened, cross the street. That's a pretty large boundary, but you have the right to that. And so we can think about it sexually would be like how I like to be touched, how I like to touch you, and relationally, if your boss asks you out on a date, that's breaking a relational boundary. You start to see that we often allow the breakings of boundaries, but we also break them ourselves. So we have spiritual ones, what I believe versus what you believe. That could be political too, right? My own thoughts, my own feelings, your own thoughts and your own feelings. So when you start to look at, even in the context of the conversation we just had about that woman that you were seeing, what held you back was the fear of hurting her. Well, that's the breaking of your own boundary.
Right.
Like you're breaking your own boundary because her feelings are not your feelings. And when you start to take on other people's feelings, you are outside of your own boundary. When someone else's feelings become your feelings, their fear, their angst, their anxiety, that means they're inside your boundaries. So boundaries really delineate who someone is from who I am in the context of all of those things. And that's about being an individual, right? That's about having our own autonomy around who we are and what we like. It's like when you hang out with someone and they say, oh, I love, I don't know, some Australian rugby team. And the other person goes, oh, I love them too, but they don't. That's a good sign that they don't know who they are and they don't know how to have their own likes because they're so busy wanting to be liked.
Okay.
Yeah. So boundaries are sexy because boundaries, in essence, create self-worth. If I say to you, that behavior is not okay, what I've just done is I've said to myself, I love myself enough that I communicate this boundary. I am worthy of being treated this way. Well, they're symbiotic. So as soon as you cross that boundary and I let you, and there's no consequence, my belief will shrink again to I'm not worthy of that boundary. So boundaries construct our self-worth. They're the thing that feed it. And you can think of it like we are already whole. We are already whole. Boundaries preserve our wholeness. They draw a fence around who we are. And that makes us feel like we can now trust ourselves. We'll make much better decisions if we have good boundaries. Our anxiety will go away. I mean, so many different things will happen when we have good boundaries.
Mm. It's funny you say that about the anxiety, because when I was getting to know this chick, like my anxiety went through the roof, and I had no idea. And I realized it was because afterwards was because I wasn't listening to my intuition, and I guess would you say I was breaking my boundaries?
Well, the moment that you're not listening to your intuition, you're breaking your boundary, because you're saying to yourself, I don't trust myself. And I mean, that's a big thing to learn, right? Because of course, for people, they don't, you know, if as children, people didn't respect our boundaries, or you believe something and your dad said that shit, right away, you just learn that you can't have your own thought, that you can't have your own belief. You're like, someone forces a spiritual practice upon you. It's not like we're born into a family and they're like, do you want to be Catholic, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim? No, they just like, you're born into it. You don't get to choose. You spend the rest of your life trying to figure out how to be a good person so you don't go to hell. I mean, that sounds like a version of hell to me.
Yeah.
You know, I was born Catholic, so I know that one. We are spiritually breaking boundaries from birth. You know, but when we're in those types of situations, yeah, your anxiety will go up when you don't believe you have your own back. If you don't believe you can trust yourself, you'll be filled with anxiety.
It's very interesting, because like the moment that I stopped seeing her, talking to her, my anxiety went away. It was like a switch went off. I was like, all right, she's not a part of my life anymore. Dunk. No more anxiety.
What does that tell you?
Well, exactly.
Tells you that you're a lot smarter than you allow your intuition to be.
Yeah.
And that you ignore it far before the anxiety starts. It starts with just a nudge. And the nudge is, this behavior is maybe not safe.
Yeah. Would you feel like emotionally unsafe if that's what you mean?
Yeah, like the moment your intuition goes, that means you just need to be curious. Most of us ignore it because we were taught to ignore it. You know, you're taught to ignore it when you want to believe something or do something. So
how would you set a boundary with somebody without feeling like an asshole? Like, I don't know, let's say it's, well, I guess it comes back to you're putting their feelings above yours, isn't it?
Well, look, if you've never set a boundary, you're likely going to feel guilty about setting a boundary, which might be also that association with being an asshole. Because if you have an underdeveloped warrior within you, then when that warrior starts to show up, you're going to feel really selfish all of a sudden. You know, and it might have been shamed in your family to have self-care, to care about yourself, to have your own opinions, your own thoughts. If you like said, hey, I need something, they'd be like, look at you, always needing stuff, right? Like right away, we're going to minimize our needs when we experience those types of things. We also might have grown up in a family where parents weren't around, or there was an addict in the family, or someone who was angry, or someone with a chronic illness. Anyone who took up a large attention in the family will make it harder for us to develop what we need and what we want. And if no one was around, why would you have needs and wants? I mean, no one's there to listen. So the idea is that you can learn to actually increase your tolerance for guilt when you set a boundary. So my recommendation to anyone ever is, once you set a boundary, is to actually make sure you have someone around you that can support you in the communication of it. So you communicate it, and then you have a best friend beside you or someone on call. You know, that because you're going to have guilt and you're going to feel weird, because what's happening in that moment is you're changing from, if you love me and approve of what I say, then I'm lovable. In that moment, you are saying, I love me. I choose me. So there's a bridge that we've probably never been in, which is I have my own back instead of depending on you to tell me that I'm okay. There's a shift that happens. It's a reclamation, because shit, if you've never had a boundary around you, the first time you do it, it's going to be so foreign. So you need someone around you. I always recommend a best friend who tells you the truth. Okay. They're usually the people that we get rid of because we don't like that they're telling us the truth. So go apologize that you got rid of them and go get them back so you can have someone, right?
Yeah. So for somebody that's listening, that doesn't quite get the boundary, because even for myself, it all sounds, like it sounds not a lot, but it's quite hard to understand. If you could put it in simple terms and give an example of what a boundary would look like if you were setting one with your partner, how would that look like?
So when we want to communicate a boundary, let's say, for example, it's something common, like someone raises their voice too loud in an assertive, it's normal to express yourself, but in a way that's obviously loud and unsafe. So we might say something like, in my experience, when you raise your voice, it causes me to shut down. And if I feel not respected, because I want to build a loving, great relationship with you, I want us to be able to communicate better. And in order to stay present with you and communicate, what I need from you is to lower your volume and to speak more calmly to me. And if you, and you can express that boundary. Now, boundaries, remember, are negotiable. So if I say that to you, you might be like, I don't raise my volume. That's defensiveness, right?
Yeah.
So they haven't even heard it. The right answer to any communication of any feedback is tell me more about that. And if you find yourself getting defensive, like, I don't do that, you raise your voice. The answer to that is to say, I can see some truth in what you're saying. Ooh, that one's like eating your own shoe. I'll warn you, because I've had to say that before when I was recovering from being defensive. So boundaries, remember, are not, as you have said before, I think it was in a previous conversation we had, where someone says, tell me why. You don't have to justify why you have a boundary. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to go into long explanations. Just stand in a space that is unemotional. Communicate the boundary. You might think with someone like an ex, where you say, hey, I need to no longer have any communication with you. And the ex might get reactive to that. They might not be sure how to handle that. But we can say, like, in order to build a possible friendship in the future, I need to heal and be able to do this, this, and this.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You can say stuff like that. You can ask questions, but you do it in a very unemotional way, and you keep the best friend on call.
Okay. So if they're reactive to your boundary, what do you do then? Do you still try and talk it out with them, or do you kind of say, well, like, this isn't going to work out? And then you kind of...
Yeah. Well, boundaries should always have a consequence. So if you communicate a boundary like, don't communicate with me again, and they do, and then you say, if you do, it's like if you're fighting with someone and they keep, let's say, lying to you, and you say, if you lie to me again, I will end the relationship. It has to be a consequence you're willing to do.
Right.
And you have to do it. Because if you don't do it, then your consequence is just a suggestion. Your boundary is not real. It's just hey, maybe if you're free on Saturday, you could be a better person. Like that doesn't work. You have to set standards for behavior. You also have to remember, are you honoring boundaries within yourself? The idea is that boundaries both protect us, but they also contain us in that, like, my own thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, do I force them onto other people? If I do that, then I'm violating my own boundaries of containment. So when you communicate boundaries, that idea of holding a space of not being emotional, of communicating from a space of consequences that you're willing to act upon, and having someone by you. And you want to communicate them in a way that's as least triggering as possible, but you can't prevent someone from being triggered, right? Their reaction to it is, like, if they say, like, you say, I don't want to communicate anymore, and they get really reactive. You can say, when you speak to me like that, it's not helping things.
Yeah.
This is further reason why I need more distance. You're allowed to, if you speak to me like that again, I'm going to hang up the phone. When you're ready to talk to me in a kind way, I'm here. But till then, don't call me. And if they call back yelling, hang up on them again. And then block them if you have to. Just you have to keep raising the consequence.
I can see that definitely being easy to do with a partner. Well, relatively easy, not if you guys have the same friendship groups, because you will bump into each other. But,
Yeah.
If it's a girl that you don't really know, and you don't know her friends, then it's quite easy to do that. But like, what happens if you want to set a boundary with a family member and they don't approve of it? Like,
I mean, that's where bad boundaries start. So that's probably the hardest place to begin good
right.
boundaries. I mean, I would start learning about boundaries and setting them with work, with friends, with yourself, with when you wake up, with following through on your word with yourself. Those are all really good ways to begin. And you build up some boundary confidence. And then, you might talk to your mom. There's a lot of people I know who have poor relationships with their parents, where their parents are unkind. And they really need to step into a space with their parent where they say, if you speak to me like that again, it does not contribute to the relationship I wish to have with you till you're ready. And this is reparenting, which is ironic because reparenting is about ourselves, but we're actually reparenting our parents. Eventually you become more mature in some emotional ways than them. And so that's a big step to get to, because you have to realize that you're actually healing family lineage, inherited shit that you have. Well, fuck, if you inherited it, you're going to have to teach it up the chain of command too. And that's about becoming an adult. When you become an adult, your parents are no longer up the family hierarchy. They're actually beside you. You have to remember, like, if they weren't your parents, if your brother and sister weren't your brother and sister, would they be in your life? Blood is not thicker than water. I mean, it is technically, but I don't believe family has to be blood. There's a lot of toxicity that lives in families, and our own healing and their healing is our healing. So when we finally say to a family member, like, that's not okay, if you speak to me like that again, I'm gone, and then you follow through, they're now invited to change. We stopped enabling the behavior, which is similar to being in a relationship with someone who's really reactive, or someone who says, what about Stephanie again? And you say, if you ask about her again, I will no longer be interested in this relationship. Well, now someone cares about her enough to tell her that her behavior is not okay. That's healing. That's healing. Boundaries are love, because they say, I love me enough to tell you how to love me too.
Yeah, fully. Just to touch on the topic, how you said about reparenting.
Yeah.
I've only sort of just come into that over the last couple of months, and it's crazy. Like, and it's kind of like, what do you mean by reparenting yourself? And sort of what I've gotten out of it is basically, I now have to show myself the love that I wasn't given, or I need to talk to myself when I'm feeling certain emotions or overwhelm or anxiety to make myself feel safe and secure.
Yeah.
And also like the healing work. Like, I guess, so I'm 32 and I started my personal development journey probably 3 years ago. Not too long before I met you, actually, in Vancouver. But before that, if somebody had said to me, like, you should focus on healing, I would have been like, healing? I have no healing to do. Like, what do you mean?
I would have thought the same thing.
Like, and it's like, well, from what I've found out is, like, you need to heal trauma from your childhood. And again, if you would have told me back then you need to heal trauma from your childhood, I would have said, I don't have any trauma, right? Like, I haven't had any bad things happen to me, any traumatic experiences. Like, I've had my parents split up, but that's common these days. Like, who cares, But now that I've like dived into that, I can see how much healing work there is to be done from like my parents breaking up, like,
I bet.
and also things that, people said in the playground when you're a child, when you're in the age of 7, 8, 9, and how that has shaped you, like, you got to heal those experiences. And I think, like, if anybody's listening and you hear the word heal, it doesn't have to be scary. Like, it can be fun, and it can be enjoyable to learn about these things about your past, so then you can move on and create a life that you want to be, and show up in the world how you want to show up. So yeah, I just kind of wanted just to say that, put that out there, because it was on the top of my mind.
Yeah, I love it.
How much
Might be
time
the
we got,
first
brother?
time might be the first time someone ever shows compassion to themselves. So healing
Yeah.
is really about self-compassion and empathy. And
Yeah.
hey, maybe when I look at my story, there's some things that actually mattered. I have 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Alrighty.
Yeah.
I've got, that question is too big. So I put a bit of a poll out the other day, or a question on my Instagram, and out of 222 people that looked at my Instagram story, so I said, I'm doing an interview podcast with Mark Groves. If you're going through anything at the moment, or you have any love relationship questions, let us know and I'll ask him on the potty, right?
Yeah.
And out of 222 people, nobody asked anything. So it looks like everyone's got their fucking shit together.
Yeah, we all have it figured out. That's good.
Which is great. But no, I did get one. And it's from our buddy Julian Haig.
Right on.
Yeah. So first of all, he asks, how can men be vulnerable in a world that's telling them not to be?
By being. I mean, that's it. It's like an act of rebellion every time you share your feelings as a man. You know, we change the narrative of what's true, and that takes a lot of courage. You know, when I share how I feel, you know, and there's a YouTube video and some troll comes along and like, sounds like you had a bad relationship with your mommy, blah, 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 you know, and it doesn't mean any of that stuff hurts any less as you know, in the human experience. But I realize I have so much compassion for where that comes from, because he's been so curated to believe that he doesn't have feelings, that he comes around and tries to get rid of mine, you know. So I think it's an honor when we get shamed by another man for being emotional. To me, it means that they're learning something. They're starting to experience self-acceptance. So how do you do it? I mean, you do it. You have to. It'd be like telling women, how do you share your voice when you're being told not to? By sharing it, by getting louder. And I think when a man can get to know his feelings, when he can get to know the depth of his emotion, then when he communicates his feelings, it's not coming from a place of, I need you to validate them. It's coming from a place of, I validated them by just speaking. And I think that's true for everybody who struggles trying to share how they feel. You don't share how you feel so that people validate how you feel. You share how you feel because in sharing how you feel is validating how you feel. And to change the narrative of what it means to be a man, we just need to be men that are different. And of course, you know, in Australian culture, I know there's like sayings like the tall poppy syndrome and stuff like that. You know, and as a kid, I mean, sure, I remember saying to friends like, stop being a pussy, you know, and that kind of stuff. And now I could never say something like that, because I recognize such the impact of words and how they make people feel when a friend is showing emotion. I mean, I never would have said that if a friend was crying, but maybe in sports, if they didn't like, you know, walk off the immense injury they probably just suffered. We're like, stop being a pussy. And they're like, my leg is broken. Oh, okay, never mind. You know, it's fascinating how we reject it. We only reject it because we're afraid of it. You know, when someone starts speaking up, then they inspire other people to do the same. And you yourself and Julian have done a beautiful job of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's
It's still very scary to do it though, because, you know, women want a soft man, a vulnerable man, someone that's in touch with his feelings. But then when you bring that to the table, sometimes you can be shamed for it and be told to stop being such a deep thinker, you know, just get over it. Like, you shouldn't be, why are you complaining so much? You're a man. You should just move on, you know?
Yeah.
So
those are women who can't hold that container. They're not your women.
Yeah.
They're not your women. Those are women who can't hold that container because they've never been faced with a man who can, you know? And so that also is a test too. Will you stand in the truth of how you feel? Like, does you minimizing and shaming, imagine if a man said that to a woman too, and it happens. But if we said it to a woman, we'd be destroyed if it got public.
Yes.
Like, you're a woman. What are you doing sharing that? Shouldn't you have all your shit together?
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine? Oh my God. That even hurts my mouth to even say, because I know how damaging that would be.
Totally.
But we are not sure how to handle men's emotions. We don't believe they know their own feelings. We don't trust them. We don't. And that's because when our feelings get communicated from a place of, I need her validation of my feelings, she's not your mom, you know? And when it comes from that space of like, this is how I feel, you're not here to like fix me, repair me. You're just here to hold it. Maybe hold me. That's a gift when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, man. All right. Well, I think that's time. And I want to respect time. I don't want to go over the time limit. I know you're a busy man. You've got plenty going on. But just quickly, if people want to find out more about you, where can they find you, mate? Where can they look you up?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Create the Love. And if you Google Mark Groves, MarkGroves, you can find all the things. YouTube, Twitter. I would say Instagram's the place where all of it is, though. So
you're pretty active on that.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, man. I'm so happy that you're doing this. It's about fucking time, if you ask me. But I mean,
true.
You're doing great work. And this is just part of, for me, starting the work was the first part of self-expression. So I appreciate you doing this. It's inspiring.
Thank you for acknowledging me, and appreciate you coming on, mate. And I just appreciate you as a human in general.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much for coming on, mate. I'll speak to you soon.
You as well.